What is going on, guys? Verkdevoden here, and today, I'm gonna do something a little different. Three different things happened today that made me reconsider how I approach engaging with people online. And this is something that actually struck me as kind of stark because I tend to take people for their word when people engage with me or the channels, the ideas that we throw out there or we support. I come at it from the basis that they are asking questions or trying to make an argument in good faith. And for a while, I kind of started getting jaded in that people weren't doing that. And in a way they weren't, but I don't think it was intentional. And I had an interaction today with someone, and it really kind of highlighted this larger issue that is not, it's multifaceted, it's not one thing. But I think the big difference is that I am much older. Like I'm going to be 50 soon. And a lot of the people who I seem to engage with, I believe, are of a much younger generation. And there is a half a lifetime of experience and knowledge that I cannot simply assume they are running off of. And what was interesting is that an individual brought up the idea of voter ID today and why that sounds like a good idea. And I tried to place in the context that it is unconstitutional because it puts a paywall literally to voting, which the Constitution, we've argued that before the Constitutional Convention, after, during Reconstruction, during suffrage, during the Civil Rights Movement, and even today. And what was interesting is that I tend to do the same thing that I always do, is that I look at the argument, I reach into my experience bag, and I'm like, hey, this is what I know. Let me see if I can pull up some like analytics. Let's see if I can look up some of the counterpoints from, what I would call conservative or hard right-leaning sites, how they frame the subject, because that typically is where people are coming from when they're engaging with me, is they have, not to make it too binary, but either you have a framing that's more left-leaning or you have a framing that's more right. To what degree is individualistic. So I put this up, and this is something that I literally just found out. The person said to me that, well, I'm not really interested in reading the statistics and the things that you posted. And I still hold the opinion that I do. Now, to someone who is older, that to me is like, that's mind-blowing to me. It shouldn't be, but it is. And it shouldn't be because I see this replicated every day in family members, coworkers, people I randomly interact with, and people on the channel. But somehow it still blows my mind that in the face of evidence, of empirical fact, people shy away from it. And what's funny is that just this week, I finally learned what the acronym TL semicolon DR meant. Too long, didn't read. No idea, right? There's so many acronyms on social media. I just, like, if it's not LMAO or LOL, I didn't bother with it. I ignored it. I didn't engage with it. I just didn't know, right? And so I finally looked it up, and I was like, TLDR. That seems to be the MO. Oh, fuck. I don't even know if I can use that. Modus operandi. That seems to be the that seems to be the approach that the younger generation has. And I'm not saying this from like an old man sort of crony, like, oh, damn kid. I was the same way. right? I would read one book on a subject and think that I knew everything about it. Like when I was in college, God, 25 years ago, I read a Howard Zinn book and thought I knew everything about the civil rights movement, and then I read, God, what was the one after that I must have read? I think probably like a Michael Moore book, and I was like, I know everything about industrialization and crony capitalism. And you have this framework then, because we didn't have the internet in the way that it does today. And so I typically think that, like, on your phone, on a tablet, on a PC, you have something no one else has ever had, and you have access to all of human history as we know it, as is written. No one really wants to read about it. And I think the big difference where the age gap comes in is that when I was younger, I wanted to know about it, but I didn't know which books to necessarily read. And college already has kind of this, depending on the subject that you're looking for, it tries to give you, with your undergrad, you have the electives and you have like the basic requirements that you have to take for your major and all that stuff, but it's trying to give you a well-rounded education. But I think that the internet has done more of a disservice. I'm being judgmental here. I know that. I recognize that, but I'm gonna stay with it. I think that the internet has allowed people to think less about a subject and instead try to instantaneously fact check people in the moment with their own confirmation bias. So when they're looking on the internet, they're not doing searches on Google or Yahoo or whatever with the phrase that, hey, here's the situation, I may be wrong, let me look up this person's viewpoint and look at the analytics that would prove their point. They're looking at it from a confirmation bias, saying, okay, well, I know this isn't true, so let me look up how this is a lie. And of course, search engines are going to give you everything you want. You're going to find this now on TikTok, YouTube, whatever. I don't even know all the social media sites. So anyway, it made me kind of think of what kind of material I want to put out there when engaging in these subjects, as opposed to just playing video games over a podcast that the podcast has references that I may understand, because the podcasters and myself are older. We went to college. We have life experience. We have seen these things happen over and over again. And I realized that I'm not setting people up for success in the way that I craft these videos. So I'm going to try to change that a little bit. And today the subject is systematic racism in America. And I'm going to show you a couple things. I'm going to show you something historically that is wonderful. If you don't know who James Baldwin is, my God, please, if anything you do and look up about James Baldwin, is just watch his videos, watch his interviews, watch his him read his essays and whatnot. Just do that. And if that intrigues you, my God, just get any one of his books and read it. But what I'm going to do today is that there is this famous debate that was in Britain between Baldwin and Buckley, is typically what it's called to. I'm not going to go into the Buckley side. Buckley is someone who is trying to whitewash America's and his own racist views in this debate. But I'm going to show you something. The first part of Baldwin's argument is so crystal clear. And then I'm going to jump to a clip that I think happened either yesterday or today to show you how little has changed. There we go.
Great pleasure and a very great sense of honor that I called Mr. James Baldwin to speak third to this motion.
Now we have Mr. James Baldwin, the star of the evening, who has been sitting, listening attentively, getting a wonderful reception here in the Cambridge Union. Tremendous enthusiasm from all sides of the House for Mr. Baldwin, who has been listening to the arguments. Now will bring the voice of actual experience to the debate.
Good evening. I find myself, not for the first time, in the position of a kind of Jeremiah. For example, I don't disagree with Mr. Burford that the inequality suffered by the American Negro population of the United States has hindered the American dream. Indeed, it has. I quarrel with some other things he has to say. The other, deeper element of a certain awkwardness I feel has to do with one's point of view. I have to put it that way. One's sense, one's system of reality. It would seem to me that the proposition before the House, if I put it that way, is the American dream at the expense of the American Negro, or the American dream is at the expense of the American Negro, is a question hideously loaded, and that one's response to that question, or one's reaction to that question, has to depend on an effect on where you find yourself in the world, what your sense of reality is, what your system of reality is. That is, it depends on assumptions which we hold so deeply as to be scarcely aware of them. A white South African, or a Mississippi sharecropper, or a Mississippi sheriff, or a Frenchman driven out of Algeria, all have, at bottom, a system of reality which compels them to, for example, in the case of the French exile from Algeria, to defend French reasons for having ruled Algeria. The Mississippi or the Alabama sheriff, who really does believe when he's facing a Negro boy or girl, that this woman, this man, this child, must be insane to attack the system to which he owes his entire identity. Of course, for such a person, the proposition of which we're trying to discuss here tonight does not exist. And on the other hand, I have to speak as one of the people who've been most attacked by what we must now here call the Western or the European system of reality. What white people in the world, because the doctrine of white supremacy, I hate to say it here, comes from Europe. That's how it got to America. Beneath then, whatever one's reaction to this proposition is, has to be the question of whether or not civilizations can be considered as such equal, or whether one civilization has the right to overtake and subjugate and in fact to destroy another. Now what happens when that happens? Leaving aside all the physical facts which one can quote, leaving aside rape or murder, leaving aside the bloody catalog of oppression, which we are in one way too familiar with already, what this does to the subjugated, the most private, the most serious thing this does to the subjugated, is to destroy his sense of reality. It destroys, for example, his father's authority over him. His father can no longer tell him anything because the past has disappeared, and his father has no power in the world. This means, in the case of an American Negro, born in that glittering republic, and in the moment you are born, since you don't know any better, every stick and stone and every face is white, and since you have not yet seen a mirror, you suppose that you are too. It comes as a great shock around the age of 5 or 6 or 7 to discover that the flag to which you have pledged allegiance, along with everybody else, has not pledged allegiance to you, It comes as a great shock to discover that Gary Cooper killing off the Indians when you were rooting for Gary Cooper, that the Indians were you. It comes as a great shock to discover that the country, which is your birthplace, and to which you owe your life and your identity, has not in its whole system of reality evolved any place for you. The disaffection, the demoralization, and the gap between one person and another, only on the basis of the color of their skins, begins there and accelerates throughout a whole lifetime. So that presently you realize you're 30 and are having a terrible time managing to trust your countrymen. By the time you are 30, you have been through a certain kind of mill. And the most serious effect of the mill you've been through is, again, not the catalog of disaster. The policemen, the taxi drivers, the waiters, the landlady, the landlord, the banks, the insurance companies, the millions of details, 24 hours of every day.
I'm pausing this for two reasons. This should all sound very familiar to you, because discrimination in banking, redlining, gerrymandering for political purposes all still happen every single fucking day. By the way, that was Sidney Poitier that they showed in the audience there. Just a little FYI.
Which spell out to you that you are a worthless human being. It is not that. It is by that time you've begun to see it happening in your daughter or your son or your niece or your nephew. You are 30 by now, and nothing you have done has helped you to escape the trap. But what is worse than that is that nothing you have done, and as far as you can tell, nothing you can do, will save your son or your daughter from meeting the same disaster and not impossibly coming to the same end. Now, we're speaking about expense. I suppose there are several ways to address oneself to some attempt to define what that word means here. Let me put it this way, that from a very literal point of view, the harbors and the ports and the railroads of the country, the economy, especially of the southern states, could not conceivably be what it has become if they had not had, and do not still have indeed, and for so long, so many generations, cheap labor. I am stating very seriously, and this is not an overstatement, that I picked the cotton, and I carried it to market, and I built the railroads under someone else's whip for nothing.
Now, if you're watching that and you have this knee-jerk reaction that this is all in the past and this isn't how people look at each other, and this is not systemic, this is not generational, that this doesn't happen today. I'm not even going to go into what kind of rock and how large that must be you living under to actually believe this. But let's just take an example of something that happened in the last 24 hours. Right here.
He admits they made it up, right? As opposed to, and if you listen to the full clip, he says, by drawing attention to what's happening on the ground, it's just, as this like line goes online, you don't hate the media enough. Go ahead.
You remember Alternative Facts with Kellyanne? They did the same thing. She wasn't saying you make up fictions and pretend they're facts. You bring other facts to bear in the debate that are being ignored. And that's what he was saying. And I think it was in that interview where Dana Bash says, the police have gone through 11 months of recordings of calls, and they've only found 2 Springfield residents calling to complain about Haitian migrants taking.
Got to turn on my mic. This is already being whitewashed by politicians and people on the right. So just to make sure that we heard that right, let's go back and listen to it again.
Complain about Haitian migrants taking.
What was that? What was that, Rich? Mr. Rich Lowry? What was that?
About Haitian migrants.
Just for those who are still unsure about what he said, let's do it a 4th time.
To complain about Haitian migrants.
Now, people are already jumping, say like, oh, he mispronounced migrants. Are you fucking kidding me? This is how these type of people speak about other non-white people in private. And this is a slip up, right? And there's no justifying this, right? He wasn't listening to a Dr. Dre song, right? In the shower, and he let it slip. Like, he is on Megyn Kelly's show trying to basically frame that Haitian migrants are eating cats and dogs, right? And what did he call them? So my point is that the way society looked at James Baldwin and any non-white then, like close to over 50 years ago, is still how they look at them now. Nothing's really changed.